is it with all the alumni returning to the university these days? I'm Chris Wolvie, the wrestling blog who always tells it like it is. I said making Cargill a champ this soon was a mistake, but they went and did it anyway. They'll probably due to Asuka's injury, but the good news is that match is the only one I missed, so there you go. I don't talk too much about NXT, especially since it seemed like they were demoted from a third WWE brand back to a developmental brand a few years ago. I do watch it though. Any show with more matches on it in a 2-hour span than Raw sometimes has in a 3-hour span, that can't be too bad. And now that it seems to be moving to what is considered network television in the loosest sense of the term, they need to kick things up a notch, I agree. But there's something that's been bothering me. And any of you who have gone through my past episodes should know what it is by now. It seems that recently, more and more superstars from Raw and SmackDown are showing up on NXT. Even those that were drafted a few weeks ago still show up in NXT. Of course, this is nothing new. Several superstars have gone or returned to NXT in the past number of years, as if to show the rookies how it's done or whatever. I mean, at the end of the last decade, Dolph Ziggler cheated his way to the NXT title after spending over a decade on the main roster. And when Charlotte Flair won the Royal Rumble in 2020, she challenged and defeated the NXT Women's Champion for some reason. But these days, folks we've seen forever on Raw and SmackDown and are coming in to challenge the up-and-comers. Baron Corbin springs to mind, having run out of things to be besides king, happy, or sad. He moved to NXT to rebuild himself, it seemed. He and Braun Breaker even took the NXT tag titles and held on to them even after Breaker was promoted. Now Corbin's back with his burns the ship motif in the main roster. Maybe, just maybe, he might be up for one more secondary title run before the hanging up the boots. But more recently, things have gotten even worse. NXT held a combine for women to see which 12 would become contenders for the new Women's North American title. And of the top 12, a fair amount of them were from Raw or SmackDown. I mean, hell, even Chelsea Green tried for the NXT Women's title recently, as if she was incapable of winning even the women's tag titles. Now, thankfully, no main roster woman has yet made the final 6 that will be in that ladder match at Battlegrounds, and it is my considered opinion that there should not be. This title is for the women of NXT, not for one on Raw or SmackDown. If Paul Levesque feels the main roster needs a secondary women's title, much like the TBS title in AEW, he should introduce a women's Intercontinental and or United States Championship. Leave NXT to Shawn Michaels and The Rockette. And, I think the real issue I have with the main roster folks in NXT is that, well, they're essentially pulling double duty. No sooner do they finish a match on Monday than they have to hop a flight to Orlando to be there on Tuesday. I don't know if they're getting paid more for this, but considering how relatively low tier the talent is, even on the main roster, it would shock me if they were compensated for more than just a plane ticket. So why do it? Some feel it's to give a bit more credibility to NXT as the move to CW approaches. Having vets from Raw and SmackDown on the show should bring in more viewers because, let's face it, the CW is still a low-tier network, not ready to compete with the Big Four even after all this time. But when the next WWE draft comes along and NXT's only contribution is outgoing superstars instead of incoming, people are going to figure it out. NXT is not a main brand. They might try to make it a main brand again this year before the move, But unless NXT competes against Raw and SmackDown in the next War Games PLE, that's not very likely. Even the next Royal Rumble winner decides to try for an NXT title, it's not going to be a WrestleMania, but it's Stand and Deliver. And nobody wants to give up WrestleMania spot for that. Look, if a former NXT superstar shows up as a mentor or a one-time tag partner, I can dig that. Famous alumni of colleges sometimes return to their alma mater to become professors or coaches or even just make a speech at a graduation. This is no different when it comes down to it. But for the love of insert deity here, stop giving them title matches. And more so, stop having them win titles. There are those who move from NXT to the main roster who just can't cut the mustard. Those are called former WWE superstars, not future NXT champions. If the superstar isn't ready for the main roster, they should have never been promoted in the first place. Moving them back to NXT will just show the world that you made a mistake in promoting them. And making them a champion in NXT is a last-ditch effort to see if they should come back to the main roster. Bottom line, keep those in NXT until you find a spot for them on the main roster. That will prevent not only the Dolph Ziggler's and Baron Corbin's from retreating, but also the Cameron Grimes and Vaudevillains from being kicked out. I'm Chris with the Wrestling Blog, who always tells it like it is. Pray for peace. I'll see ya.